Good afternoon. My name is Yohan Lawrence. I represent the Joint Apparel Association Forum, which is the apex body for the apparel export industry. We are a $5 billion industry with the single largest industrial exporter. JAAF has already made its written submissions to the PUCSL, and I just want to take the opportunity here to talk of 3 or 4 points that we brought in that. Firstly, in terms of overestimation of demand, I have two graphs for you. The one on the left is the electricity generation for January. The one on the right is the apparel exports for 2022. If you take the last quarter of 2022, you'll see a drop of around 15 to 20%. If you talk to the BOI and ask them how much water is being consumed, they will tell you that that has also fallen. There is clearly right now a reduction in demand. So we don't see the necessity for a tariff increase that is based on an increased demand. An overestimation of demand will result in a higher projected cost and therefore higher than necessary tariff. Our request to the PCUSL and the CV is that tariff revisions are not made until a proper assessment of demand is done. The CV should also look to lowering its own generation cost and mandatory cost reductions before a tariff adjustment is made. The apparel industry right now, due to global recession, is seeing a reduction of around 20%. This will go at least until the second half of this year. We don't understand how, as the single biggest industrial exporter facing a 20% reduction, an argument can be put forward for an increase of tariff because of an increase in demand. And the facts of the matter are completely contrary to that. Secondly, in terms of Sri Lanka's position, it is important that Sri Lanka Apparel, as does all other manufacturers, can compete internationally. I have before you some indication of electricity costs from other apparel manufacturing countries. Countries like Africa, Benin, and Togo, who are pushing hard for investments, are offering electricity in the region of 8 cents per kilowatt hour. With the recent tariff hike in 2022, Sri Lanka now sits in a competitive band with other countries such as India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, all operating around 9 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The PCUSL document shows an increase of 31% for the industrial sector. This will make Sri Lanka uncompetitive. End of story. Within that tariff, one thing that we raised at the last submission as well was the impact of the off-peak tariff. The off-peak tariff prior to the last reduction was at 685. In the PCUSL document, it was increased that suggested it went to 1450. It actually went to 15. And in the new document, we're talking about 34 rupees. Sri Lanka needs to grow a dedicated textile sector. The government is investing heavily in the textile zone in Eravur in the east of the country. Fabric mills need to operate 24 hours a day. And a 400% increase in the off-peak tariff is simply going to be at complete odds with the object of the government to grow the textile base in Sri Lanka. We should be encouraging companies to move more to off-peak operations. But what we are doing here is giving them an incentive to stay in the peak time window because we've taken away the incentive to move to off-peak. We see this horrendous increase in off-peak as being completely unjustified and again flying in the face of all economic arguments. I have two other comments. One is with regard to renewable energy and rooftop solar. In line with the government's commitments to generate 70% from renewables, we call on the CEB to urgently scale up the commissioning of renewable energy, including rooftop solar. We need a commercially viable tariff for Net Plus. The apparel industry has installations of around 200 megawatts of solar power. A number of these companies have just simply not been paid for the last 7 to 8 months. No business can operate without its income. In the light of the fact that the CEB is not able to make these payments, our ask is that we permit existing companies under Net Plus to move to net metering. This will take immediately a cash flow burden out of the CEB. It will also allow us to increase our footprint of solar, which will in turn take a reduction of the demand, which will in turn mean that the CEB can generate at a lower cost. This is connected to the concept of power wheeling, which JAAF has been lobbying for a long time. We see this as the single biggest catalyst in the move to renewable energy and will be a conduit for investment in this sector. Increased private sector investment in renewables will reduce the load on the CEB, thereby allowing the CEB to then reduce its price to the consumer. Why such a simple adjustment to the CEB Act has taken so long is beside us. It flies in the face of all of the economic facts. That pretty much sums up our ask. So our ask is that before we go ahead with any tariff increase, particularly of the size and the nature that is being discussed, we look at the facts and we make sure that if we are giving a tariff increase, we are only limiting it to what is actually needed. Certainly there is no, from the apparel industry, there is no increase in demand for the first half of 2023. That is blatantly apparent. You can see it in the data. And in a scheme where we are talking of a power correction that is for the first half of the year, we see no reason to increase it. Thank you.